It is week 2. Lions are gearing up for their Monday Night Football matchup against the Green Bay Packers. And here we're going 3 and Out, presented by Comerica. What better person to go 3 and Out with? Describe the biggest 3 headlines than the opposing view of Wes Hodkiewicz, the digital reporter for the Green Bay Packers. Wes, we're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers and the expectations for him this season, how the Packers can get a bounce-back win, and then, of course, running back Jamaal Williams, who was a Green Bay Packer for his entire career, is now here with the Lions. We'll talk about him going back to the place where it all started. But Wes, let's start out with Aaron Rodgers and those QB expectations. I was tuned into that July 28th press conference when Rodgers kind of delved into how he was feeling about the organization. How did that moment really set the tone going forward for this season?
Well, Danny, I think what it did is it told everybody that Aaron Rodgers is back and he's 100% committed to this team in this season. Now that's where the focus has mostly lied, 2021. I know there was a lot of outside chatter this offseason on what Rodgers' intentions were, where he was going to go, what he saw his future. But, for the most part, he also stayed out of the public eye. He focused on himself. It was a lot on his mental, well-being, and just kind of trying to figure out where he was at now at 37 years old and after 16 NFL seasons. But as he talked about the week before coming back, talked to a lot of former teammates, a lot of current teammates, and that sort of stoked the competitive fire in him, wanting to come back and chase another Super Bowl title. And while it was a tough start for them last week against the Saints, if you watch this team during training camp, it looked as if Rodgers hadn't skipped a beat. And Devontae Adams, Mercedes Lewis, the number of veterans that they returned, Rodgers knows what the expectations are for this team, and he understands, potentially how far they could go this season.
So you're saying the expectations really haven't changed. They've done pretty much everything right up until that week 1 game. Rodgers throws 2 picks. He only threw 5 all of last season. So how does that kind of change his mindset, or where does he need to kind of just take a step back and just regroup?
Yeah, Danny, I think the thing that stood out to me the most in his presser afterwards is, Rodgers always seems to know what to say and when to say it. He said, hey, we played bad and I played bad. They lost 38-3 coming out of the gate. That's not what they were expecting against a New Orleans Saints team that was having to not play at the Superdome, was actually down in Jacksonville, due to Hurricane Ida. So, Rodgers, the biggest thing he looked at is there's 16 more of these opportunities. They still feel confident inside that locker room about what this team is and what it can be this season. And as a lot of the veterans said this past week, if you jump off the ship after 1 week, that doesn't say a lot about the character of your locker room. It doesn't say a lot about the character of your team. And that's why they spent Monday and Tuesday trying to look back at this thing and see exactly what they did wrong. They also were very focused on this next step, because this is a Detroit Lions team that you cannot take for granted, that's coming in week 2 to your own house in a big NFC North matchup.
You just mentioned it. Packers, they allowed only scored 3 points on the scoreboard. They allowed 38 against Jameis Winston's Saints. Where is the biggest concern on either side of the ball right now that you can see?
Well, I think the defense had huge expectations, right? They have a new defensive coordinator this year in Joe Barry. Spent the whole offseason talking about his scheme and the energy that he's bringing. They, as much as we talk about Rodgers in this offense, which was number 1 ranked in terms of scoring last year, this defense also was a top 10 overall unit. So returning as many players as they did with, Zadarius Smith and Jair Alexander being an all-pro, they want to be able to kick this thing into another gear under Barry. Unfortunately, it didn't happen that first week against the Saints, but the fact is they are healthy for the most part. They're, you can kind of see that overall there's a lot of synergy there with the defensive components. It is just a lot about trying to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and prove that, okay, this defense, it wasn't a telling performance. They want this to be an anomaly towards where they want to take things. But certainly it was a wake-up call that things are going to take time to come together, and you're going to need to pull together as a group in order to make that next step.
The Packers have not lost back-to-back games since the regular season in 2019. So how did the Packers keep from losing for the second time this season?
Well, and just go back to focus on what they do well. And I thought one thing that happened in that game against the Saints is they only had 12 offensive possessions until the final minute. Defensively, they couldn't get off the field. Offensively, they failed to establish a rhythm. When Matt LaFleur's offense is really functioning at its optimum level, you'll see the run game being able to dictate the pace. You'll see the play action being built off of that. The Packers had to stick in a lot of 11 personnel, a lot of 2-minute personnel, and that really isn't where they're really finding their sweet spot. So I think the big thing for this game is going to be those first 15 plays. Coming out, setting the tone. They have 2 starting rookies now on this offensive line, allowing those guys to get comfortable and being able to establish that rhythm. Because if you see this defense or this offense the last 2 years, it is a rhythm-based offense. When they get the ball moving, they tend to keep it moving. But if they get stalled early, that's where sometimes they have a hard time pulling themselves back out of it.
All right, let's get to that third and last point. Running back Jamaal Williams, he spent the first 4 years of his career with Green Bay. I cannot imagine how much the Green Bay Nation misses Jamaal. His personality is still intact here, I promise you. But when he was in that Packers uniform, what kind of player was he?
Well, I'll tell you this right now, Danny. This has been the number one thing I've been saying all offseason. The Detroit Lions got a heck of a bargain out of Jamaal Williams. You're going to see this. Not only is he an incredible personality in what he says and how he says it, in the way that he's kind of beloved by his teammates, he is who he is, and he's very proud of that. But I think sometimes what can get overshadowed with that is just how talented of a running back he is. I mean, throughout my 4 years covering him, it was sort of a thing not to talk about the fact he hadn't fumbled at all. Well, now he doesn't play for the Packers, so I can talk about that. This is a guy that stepped into the National Football League, has over 500 carries or whatever it is now, and still has not put the ball on the grass. He is an excellent pass blocker. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. When he came in 2017, this is a guy that could have easily been a bell cow back for this offense, but because they also drafted Aaron Jones, he didn't have to be that. So the Lions being able to get him, and I think you saw that in the opener, exactly the dual threat that he provides and just how much of a real consistent presence he can be there, in addition to being a really fun personality that is just as easily going to be able to have a joke with the teammate as he is, being able to punch a ball into an end zone.
You just mentioned it. He's versatile. He's dynamic. So what does that Green Bay defense need to do to slow Jamaal down?
First 2 quarters, that's where I really look at this thing. One reason why Green Bay's had the success it's had against Detroit the last 2 years, it's been able to get the Lions out of their rhythm. Now, I think this backfield that they've put together is the best that Green Bay has seen so far. So seeing exactly how this defense, bounces back from last week when they gave up 170 rushing yards, 140 rushing yards in the first half, it is going to be really important to be able to come out for Green Bay's perspective and find a way to control the tempo in the trenches. I think that's where this game's going to be won. Which team prevails on both sides of the ball in that area? Jamaal is incredibly talented. He's a guy that can really hurt you if you let him get going early. So being able to curtail that and get them in second and longs early on, Green Bay knows what they're dealing with. Most of these guys practice against this guy for 3-4 years, and it's going to be important for them to throw him out of that rhythm.
Oh, this is going to be a good one. I can just tell already. Monday Night Football at Lambeau Field. Wes, it'll be my first time at Lambeau. Any advice you can give to the rookie?
Well, I'll tell you this right now. You're going to see a really energized crowd. The first time the Packers will have a full crowd here, since the beginning of the pandemic. There is nothing like going and walking into that stadium on game day. It's cool in all 32 of these NFL teams and stadiums, but in Green Bay, whether it's the smell of the brats or just the fandom in the in the parking lot, it's definitely an experience unlike any other. So I think you're in for a treat as far as that life kind of journey is bucket list sort of item is concerned.
I've heard great things about the brats and the cheese curds, so I'm going to have to try them at this rate.
That as well.
Man, Wes, thank you so much. We cannot wait to come out there to Green Bay and face your Packers.
Thank you, Danny. I appreciate it.